welcome to All Steelers Talk, your home for everything Pittsburgh Steelers, presented by allsteelers.com. Hello, lovely people. It is Friday, November 19th, Fridays with Derek the Kid. This is All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube at All Steelers Talk and follow your favorite podcast host at NoStrack at Steelers_DB. Derek, the Steelers are 2-3 days away from Sunday Night Football in LA. How are you feeling? What are you feeling?
It's going to be a big one, man. A lot of injuries. Seems like the Steelers are just the walking wounded right now. First the groin injuries, now it's COVID and everything else. So big game, though, especially for like wild card implications. Chargers a potential wild card team. We know the Steelers are making that push as well. So big game for the playoff standings.
Big. I think that's kind of like an underrated thing at this point, as a lot of people are talking about Mason Rudolph, no Ben Roethlisberger, Minka Fitzpatrick. Everybody and their mother is injured, like you said. This could come down to a solid 6-7 seed in the playoffs. The Chargers, they might not be super hot right now, but they aren't dead. They're by no means dead. They're 5-4. The Steelers are 5-3-1. This is pretty much the same team heading into it. Both teams have had on and off seasons. It could be big, especially in the grand scheme of things, like you said. And plus, the AFC pretty weak right now, pretty rough.
The AFC's wide open, man. It's
wide open. Before we get into everything, I'm pretty sure you picked the spread for the Steelers, total blowout, then texted me before the game and said absolutely taking the spread. I just want to throw it out there that we all got it wrong, but if I was going to bust Donnie and I was going to bust myself, I had to make sure that
I don't want to talk about last week's game. No, I mean, really bad. I mean, it's a bad performance. I mean, there's nothing else to talk about it. It feels like a loss because that's pretty much what it was. I mean, It was a game that the Steelers really needed to win to get to 6-3 and have a really good shot at getting that wild card, one of the 3 wild card spots. But really disappointing way to end a football game too. A tie was but a tie honestly was the perfect way for that whatever performance from both teams, which was extremely ugly to end.
Yeah, I agree. The football game shouldn't even have counted. They should have hung it up at halftime and been like, okay, guys, we're done. This is not the product we're putting out. Let me ask this real quick before we dive into the Chargers. Mm-hmm. If it comes down to it, and I think the spread at the beginning of the season or whatever, the over-under on the Steelers wins was 8.5. Mm-hmm. Should the tie count half a win? And it should just be null and void? Or is that a tie? And if you bet the over and they finish 8-1, it sucks to be you.
You know, I don't know how like Vegas treats that. That's a really interesting question. I'm assuming that 9 is a win, 8's a loss.
Yeah, I think that a tie is a tie.
Yeah, I don't know that the tie really plays into it. But yeah, I mean, just really frustrating because that's a very winnable game against a Detroit team that not playing very well, and they even lost more guys to injury during the game too, the same as the Steelers did. They had Trey Flowers exit the game, couple cornerbacks exit too, I believe. So it was an ugly game at Heinz Field in some bad weather conditions, and hopefully we don't see another performance like that ever again.
No, definitely not. On to Sunday night. In LA, I have to tell you that I stood in the freezing cold today at practice. Like I'm talking 30 degrees, felt like it was 5. I forgot my winter coat at my girlfriend's house, so I was just in a sweatshirt. Yeah. Oh, trust me, it was bad. Yeah. All while the Steelers had a perfectly warm and fine indoor practice facility to go and prepare for 85 degrees in LA in 2 days. It doesn't make any sense to me, but I'm pretty sure they did that against the media. The Chargers, they do have their holes. They are 5-4. They have not been super hot lately, as the Steelers could be kind of in the same boat. We're going to start with the Chargers offense, obviously led by Justin Herbert, but there are plenty of big names on there, including the running back, Austin Eckler. Just a quick overview. What do you see from this offense when you look at it at first glance?
Yeah, so Joe Lombardi's their offensive coordinator, and he's kind of brought over his system, which, kind of originated, I think, in Detroit. That's the first time I remember him. But he worked with Matthew Stafford for a couple of years, and then he kind of moved over to New Orleans with Drew Brees. So A lot of similar conceptual things, scheme-wise, a lot of quick passing game. Like you would think like a quarterback with Herbert and that huge arm and all the arm talent that he possesses. It's a really quick underneath passing game. I mean, he's in the bottom 10 for like air yards per attempt. He likes to get the ball out of his hands quick. They got guys on the outside and in the backfield that can win one-on-one matchups underneath. We know about Keenan Allen, what he did to the Steelers at Heinz Field a couple of years ago. Austin Eckler, a very capable receiver out of the backfield. They like to get him in space. And then their big play guy are kind of down the field targets, Mike Williams, a guy who doesn't necessarily have like game-breaking speed. He's more that height weight guy, but can definitely get down the field and win those contested catch opportunities. So it's an offense with plenty of options to go to for sure.
Definitely. At the Steelers, they are dealing with injuries. No Joe Hayden, no Isaiah Loudermilk, no TJ Watt. Very big. But before the show, you were telling me that there's kind of an alarming or an interesting stat that could benefit the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially because this is Blitzburgh, and whether they've kind of gone away from that success or not, they do like to blitz the quarterback. They do like to rush the quarterback. What is that stat? What did you see that kind of gave some optimism for the Steelers defense?
Yeah. So with me being on vacation this week, I've had the opportunity to be a little more devoted. But we'll just say, so I've watched like 5 or 6 Chargers games all the way through. And something that
this is this week, just so everybody knows that. This has just been 5 or 6 Chargers games this week. Yeah. This is not like a span.
Yeah, so I went through and like just some of the stuff that I was noticing, like Herbert's one of those quarterbacks. I know teams are going to these too high looks to kind of make teams like check the ball down and methodically move it. Herbert's been good against those too high looks, not forcing the ball down the field, where they've kind of had a little bit more of a struggles against like single high safety looks, which is more tailored to kind of what the Steelers like to do. The Steelers will play cover 1. They like to play cover 3, especially on 3rd and long. So I think that's encouraging. No Minkah Fitzpatrick's a threat there. Who's going to take over the deep middle field stuff? Is it going to be Terrell Edmonds? Is it going to be Trey Norwood? We expect Norwood to kind of fill in that gap. But another thing that I noticed is that Herbert, and for whatever reason, this offense, which is kind of weird seeing how much quick game they run, but he struggled a little bit against the blitz and under pressure this year. So I know the Steelers are down, their best pass rusher in TJ Watt, but I wonder if they amp up the pressure a little bit. Against 5 or more rushers this year, I think his yards per attempt is down to like 5.8 yards per attempt, which is like extremely, extremely low. And this is something that Herbert was really good at last year, especially for a rookie. Normally you don't see rookie quarterbacks do extremely well against the blitz or under pressure, but he was great last year, and he's not really been – him and that offense just hasn't really been that great this year against the blitz.
Yeah. So that obviously does benefit the Pittsburgh Steelers, but like you said, there's a lot of things that – it's like an if right now, because the last time the Steelers were without TJ Watt, the pass rush kind of like disappeared. And right now they're still dealing with that. Is this like another, can you expect like, I guess the Packers game is the only relevant time that we have to say like, oh, TJ didn't play in that game, but it was Melvin Ingram and Derek Tushka and Jameer Jones. Taco Charlton wasn't a factor. Tushka barely played at that point. Is that what we're looking for, or do you expect a little bit more, especially with, they run a lot of 3 outside linebackers?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see like what the Steelers decide to do. I think Minkah not being back there is a little bit concerning, because when you're talking about blitzing more guys, obviously takes guys out of coverage. So if you do decide to bring 5 or 6 guys, you're going to have to play some man-to-man in the back end, which hasn't been what the Steelers really want to do. And then if you play zone, which I would probably expect them to do behind it if they do choose to blitz, there's going to be some openings there. We got some question marks in the secondary. If Trey Norwood's playing free safety, who's playing in the nickel, is it going to be what I think they should do and what we talked about before the show? I think they need to move Cam Sutton inside, especially with a guy like Keenan Allen who works primarily out of the slot. Move him inside to match up with Keenan, and then maybe play like a James Pierre or even, other guys like Ahkello Witherspoon outside on the boundary to provide at least capable matchups in the secondary. Because I think if you get into a situation where you're running Arthur Millette out there against Keenan Allen, we know how that story is going to go. So nothing against Millette, but he's not a coverage guy. So It'll be interesting to see. Like, I mean, if there is a trade-off there, though, if you blitz, you take more guys out of coverage. But you might, Taco Charlton hasn't really done a lot as a pro. We'll see if he can kind of revive his career in Pittsburgh. But there's a trade-off there when you start talking about trying to manufacture pressure with blitzes. You take guys out of coverage. It's a little bit risky. But it's something that the Chargers have struggled with. So,
yeah, that is true. And the Steelers still do have options. Sure. I feel like Keenan Allen playing the slot kind of benefits the Steelers, especially in this week, because if it was an outside guy and you were like, okay, well, James Pierre is going to take on, no Joe Hayden. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's going to be James Pierre on Keenan Allen. That's not a matchup that you'd like to see, even though I do have faith in James Pierre. And I think that your thing with when you take guys out of coverage and kind of playing man helps in that situation, James Pierre is definitely a better man corner than people give him credit for. And he has had his slip-ups, but I think that overall he's got the physique and he's got the physical traits to just be like, okay, I can push guys around a little bit. I'm very lengthy. I can run with pretty much everybody. So that definitely helps. Kella Witherspoon, I think people have given up on. You've told me before that maybe he's all right. Maybe he could actually play decent football.
So Kilo, like, especially when I went back and watched Kilo for the Niners, I know he had this reputation of being like extremely inconsistent. I watched Eric Crocker talk about him a lot. If you guys don't know Eric, but he's a phenomenal DB mind, football mind in general. But I watched him talk about Kilo and kind of the same things that I saw on tape. Really inconsistent. Has flashes though of being like a legit number one corner. Like, I mean, there's some games. He had I thought that one of his best games in the past couple of years was actually against DK Metcalf, where he matched up with him really well, prevented some deep plays down the field, gave him some real trouble because he's a really athletic guy. He can really move for a guy his size. So I think it'll be interesting to see. Like, I think he is going to have to play this year or this game. He's definitely going to get a hat, in my opinion. But the Chargers haven't thrown the ball down the field as much as you'd expect. But with a guy like Mike Williams, who's been in a little bit of a slump, the Steelers rolling out James Pierre, Killer Witherspoon, both guys, Pierre really inexperienced. Witherspoon hasn't played at all this year, really. I expect them to take a couple shots deep, especially with no Minkah Fitzpatrick kind of roaming the back end. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a very interesting chess match between two teams that are still like very much figuring their way out of this like mediocrity. Almost.
Yeah. I agree. And I kind of think that the injuries somewhat help that. I don't know why I've thought that all week, but the Steelers, this is a game where the Steelers are going to be back up against the wall. And it's a team that they're about to face that people are just like, okay, well, they're probably going to lose. But the Chargers have enough holes that the Steelers can exploit them. You can say what you want, especially about the defense, but this is still the Steelers defense. And they gave them every opportunity to win that ball game against the Lions. I get it. It's the Lions. It is what it is. But I still expect that same effort against the Chargers. And I mean, they've done this before. James Pierre has starting experience. He can do what you need him to do. I get Ahkello Witherspoon or Justin Lane, not guys anybody wants to see out there on the field. But fortunately enough, the Chargers, they do have weak spots in their pass game. And I think that the Steelers can line guys up in the appropriate areas to take that. Trey Norwood has given me plenty of confidence for a 7th-round rookie who shouldn't be doing anything at all right now.
Random tidbit. Right now, halfway through the year, if you look on CIS, Trey Norwood actually leads the Steelers in wins above replacement in the secondary for their pass defense.
Can you break that down a little bit for those that don't know what win above replacement
So basically you take like whatever you would want as like your baseline secondary player, and Trey Norwood's been like, I think it's like 0.4, but he has the best wins above replacement over anybody in the secondary this year. I mean, you talk about a guy that you got in the 7th round of the NFL draft, guys that normally don't even make the team or just practice squad / special teams guys if they're on the active roster. I mean, this guy's came in and he's done a lot of good things. I thought he had another strong showing last week. There was some flashes there in coverage coming downhill. I think he's shown over the past couple of weeks that he's actually been a willing tackler. That was my main concern. In the preseason was because he didn't look like he wanted to tackle anybody. But
now, remember the Eagles game, I think?
Yeah, that has not been the case. Really, when he's been out there, he's looked like he belongs. Not an exceptional athlete by any means, but I think he's a really smart player. Oklahoma moved him around the formation over there on their defense. He can do a lot of different things for you. Like you see, he's been their nickel slot guy for several weeks, most of the year, and now he's moving back to free safety. Those guys, when you have guys like him and Cam Sutton that can move all over the formation, it really helps you in situations like this where you got injuries all over the field and you need to mix and match. Well, you got several guys in the backfield that know how to play different positions. That's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. This would have been a great game for Joe Hayden to play because it would have been the first time that the Steelers were kind of forced to say Cam Sutton's going to play the nickel and we're gonna ride with Joe Hayden and James Pierre on the outside. And I think that would have started something. It would have showed them like, all right, well, yeah, this is obviously the best lineup because clearly is the best lineup. I like Cam Sutton on the outside, but Arthur Millett's been very hit or miss. He does play well at times, plays real poor at other times. Yeah. Before we move on to the offense, is this a weekend for the torch defense, the reverse dime defense with those 3 outside linebackers?
I don't know, because I mean, it just depends. You got to have the bodies to put there. I mean, are you gonna be comfortable with Tushka? Maybe you see a little bit less of that this weekend. The one thing that really concerns me just about the quick passing game is like I've seen on tape a lot of times where they're like trying to get Austin Eckler the football in space, like on angle routes or option routes underneath. That really gives me pause because I think the Steelers are going to be smart enough. I'm going to give them credit here. I think Keith Butler learned his lesson with the linebackers on Keenan Allen thing from a couple years ago. I'm going to project with Cam Sutton inside, which we expect to happen. I think Cam will be on him the majority of the time. I don't think they're going to man him up or like single cover him all game. But I think they'll look to bracket him. What concerns me is you're going to get a lot of Devin Bush and a lot of Joe Schobert on Austin Eckler coming out of the backfield. That concerns me a little bit just because of what we've seen from Devin. He's admittedly playing a little bit slow right now. He's struggled both, as a tackler and pass coverage against the run. I mean, he's really struggling all around right now. So this is one of those games where like they could look to exploit the linebacker situation, not necessarily the 3 outside linebackers formation that we've seen a lot, that torch defense, but I think they could look to get some favorable matchups with Eckler on a linebacker this week.
This has got to be the week that Devin Bush, if that's the situation, this has to be the weekend that Devin Bush steps up obviously because it's a huge matchup. Second of all, I don't know if you heard, but his dad went on The Fan and just straight was he was just my son is still the GOAT. He hasn't lost a single step. It's like, all right, well, he's really not playing like the 10th overall pick in the draft, but maybe this is the weekend. So he's got a lot riding on that one, obviously. Yeah. Could be a weekend like that. That does concern me. It concerns me that Joe Schobert, for some reason, I don't know. He keeps getting overlooked as the guy who should be on guys like Austin Eckler. I get he makes a lot of mistakes, but he's the most consistent of the 3, I believe. Agreed. And they just don't ride with him as much as they should. I think it kind of puts guys like Devin Bush in position to have to make plays, and he hasn't so far. Same with Robert Spillane, but I think Robert Spillane has just played very even keel this season. I don't have many complaints about him. So I agree. I think this could be a weekend where Austin Eckler has a big game. As we transition into the offense, we'll get to Mason, and I see people do have questions about Mason. You wrote something this morning on All Steelers about the run game and how this could be a Najee Harris breakout performance. Not a breakout performance. He's had his breakout performances, but a solid game by Najee. What shows you that the Chargers have weak spots in the run game on defense?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a running back, you'd love going against defensive fronts like the Chargers because they really struggle at the point of attack. They've been pushed back. Even guys like Jerry Tillery and Joey Bosa, as good of a player as Bosa is, like there have been times where I felt like he was a little lacking in the run game, washed out of plays or taken out. Jerry Tillery is the guy who I've looked on tape, been moved all over the line. They just really struggle against the run, man. I mean, it's at the point of attack. They're giving up like on zone runs this year. Their opposing teams are averaging like 4.7 yards per carry, which is a ridiculous number. The Steelers run more gap or power than zone, but I think you could see a lot of split flow or zone runs against this Chargers defense, regardless if Tillery and Bosa even play. I mean, you got to think about this is a team that's going to be playing a bunch of backup guys. And even their linebackers, like we've talked about Kenneth Murray, but like Kaiser White, I mean, Kaiser White's like a hybrid. He's really not like a full-on NFL linebacker size-wise. So I just think this is a game where Najee Harris needs to get 30 carries, regardless of if Ben Roethlisberger plays, regardless if Mason Rudolph's the quarterback again this Sunday night. This is a game the Steelers can win simply because the Chargers can't stop the run. They're dead last in the NFL in rushing yards allowed. They're averaging they're allowing 5.9 yards per carry on second down. I mean, if Matt Canada just does what he should have did last week and stays committed to it, the Steelers are going to be able to move the football because I don't think that the Chargers are going to be able to stop it. They play two high safeties. They don't like rolling their safeties down into the box. The Steelers are going to have the numbers advantage. It's just a matter of like staying consistent with it and riding your rookie running back. This is why you took him in the first round.
This is why you took him in the first round. I've said this at least 2 times this week. I'll say it a third time. The game plan should be Najee Harris run, Najee Harris run, Najee Harris run, Najee Harris run, Benny Snell Jr. -1 yard run, Najee Harris run, Najee Harris run. That's how it should. That should be the whole game, no matter who's in there at quarterback. Does the offensive line missing Kevin Dotson, does that concern you? Because if you are going to run the ball, Kevin Dotson is the guy that you want to run behind. Trey Turner, another good option, but it's a major loss.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really big loss. And KD's been playing pretty well, man. Over the past couple of weeks, he got off to that atrocious start where I thought that he really just struggled over the first month of the season. But I think over the past, 4 or 5 weeks, he's been a lot better, especially in the run game. But this is a really interesting matchup, man. Like, I think we're going to see J.C. Hassener in there at guard. We saw Joe Haig filling a little bit at guard last week, too, in a pinch.
Thought the general played pretty well.
Down. And I thought both of those guys really held their own against the Detroit Lions front that we know. We talked about it last week. They have their issues all over the secondary. They're playing a bunch of practice squad guys, guys that they didn't anticipate having to use. But I thought that their play was above the line, especially for backup offensive linemen. So while Hassener has been brutal at times in his other appearances, I thought that he maybe had one of his better showings as a Steeler last week. So hopefully that continues on Sunday night.
Yeah, I agree. It's Hassenauer. I don't have high expectations for him. I don't have low expectations for him. Let's address this. I guess the Mason Rudolph loss isn't an automatic loss if Mason Rudolph's out there. What can you expect from a guy like Mason Rudolph with a full week at this point?
I think Mason's good enough to keep you in most games, and that's including this week's game. I don't anticipate the Steelers getting blown out under any stretch. Now, do I think if the Chargers offense is able to come out and put up some early points and get out to a 10-point lead, is this one probably over? It's going to be rough.
Yeah.
Getting Chase Claypool back will be big. He didn't have him last week. James Washington, we talked about that throughout the week, that he really struggled as well. I think Mason can win this game, but like I said, this game plan needs to run through Najee Harris. The Chargers secondary, I think, is probably their strength. I know for a lot of people that follow me on Twitter, I was a big Asante Samuel Jr. fan coming out of the draft. I thought he should have went in the first round. Awesome footwork, really twitched up corner. He's been really impressive to me when I watched him on film. They've got some other guys. Obviously, everybody knows about Derwin James, Nasir Adderley. Those guys have been quality players. Derwin's been a star for a long time, just struggled to stay healthy. So this game is one that I think Mason could play well as long as they don't ask him to do too much. 50 passing attempts is too much. I don't ever get into like the run pass splits just because I think there's a lot of things that go into that, like game situation. Are you playing from ahead, behind? But like last week,
I was going to say last week meant
Mason
nothing.
still had 39 attempts going into overtime, and then he had 11 more in the overtime period. I get that, in overtime you're going to have to start throwing the ball more, but even 39, I mean, I think you could argue that Najee Harris should have 30 carries in that game, just because of the weather, because of, and my main concern was, throwing the ball 3 times from inside the 5-yard line on the goal. Like, they went 1 for 3 in the red zone last week. That was a big reason they tied. And, I keep going back to that sequence of plays, the RPO and then 2 pass attempts that followed that with Mason Rudolph, just asking him to do too much, man. He's a backup quarterback. Getting Ben back, obviously, I think if anyone doubted the difference between Mason and Ben, before last week, I think you pretty much have your answer.
Not people doubt that.
I've seen a lot of people saying there's not a drop off. I don't see it personally. Maybe the drop off isn't as big as it has been in previous years, obviously, because we know that Ben's dealing with some injuries, and we've seen a bit of a decline just in some of the stuff that he can do. But where they really missed Ben last week, and I've said it on here multiple times, they missed Ben last week when that game got close and the Steelers had the ball at midfield to win the game. Ben's got 50 career game-winning drives for a reason, and that's because he's really comfortable and confident in those situations. And, there's no way they go 3 and out there with Ben under center. That's really where the Steelers need Ben and rely on Ben is when the game gets close or they have to come from behind or lead a drive to get a game-winning field goal. That's where Ben's going to be the biggest help. Like, he's not going to be a star anymore. He's past his prime, but he can still help you when the game gets close just because he's experienced and he's done it. And he has that clutch gene that he's kind of displayed for 2 decades now. You don't just do that overnight.
No, you don't. You wrote about that last week. You literally said, is Ben the most clutch quarterback of all time? And then he goes down and then, coincidentally, they needed a game-winning drive. The Mason thing's a long story. I think there's a lot of components to it. I think this week, though, what's going to help him is this is a full week with a guy like Deontay Johnson. Chase Claypool was limited most of the week, so I still think there's going to be some roadblocks there. But throwing the ball to Ray McCloud 9 times was because Mason Rudolph felt most comfortable with Ray McCloud because that's who he practices with. Deontay Johnson, a full week with him, a full game plan to know that's my first read. I think that helps significantly this week. The James Washington thing is done. I think that's about as over as the Mason Rudolph thing. It's just that connection doesn't work. It is what it is. James Washington, maybe not as good as many people think. I think a full week changes a lot, but I agree.
And I know, and we've been critical, and I was even critical in my article of his film review this week. Like, I don't think that Mason played, like, he didn't lose them the game himself. And I don't think, in large part, I don't know that Mason's done that very many times where we've seen him. I think Mason's a top 16 NFL backup, like where I think he's capable of spot starting and keeping games close. Do I look at him as even like a bridge quarterback? Not really. And the only reason is just because I feel like his ceiling is just extremely low on what he's going to be able to give you. I mean, the Steelers and his starts are just not scoring points. I mean, 16 points in 13 possessions against the Detroit Lions defense, which is arguably the worst in the league, and they were banged up at that. Just it's not good enough. But I do expect this game to be close. I mean, even if Mason does start, I don't know. I mean, even with the Steelers' injuries on defense, I think they'll be able to keep it relatively close. But obviously, if the game's close, you'd prefer to have Ben out there.
No doubt. Which is the perfect transition to our game picks this week. I'm going to change mine because I picked the Chargers.
He's hedging.
I have to. Like, I've been asked a couple of times the last 2 or 3 days, like what my pick is, and I've just gone Chargers with the Steelers covering the 6.5 spread, and I just don't feel good about that. But I'm going to let you go first. So first, the spread: Steelers are 6.5-point dogs on Sunday night, with an over-under of 42. No. Over-under of, I think, 46.5 on SI Sportsbook.
So the spread's 6.5. I'll make 2 separate predictions. I don't think the Steelers cover if Mason plays. I think they'll lose by like 7 to 10.
Okay.
I do think they cover with Ben. The thing that worries me, I do want to pick the Steelers if Ben plays. The thing that worries me, though, is that Ben's been bad off of rest for a while now. Like, it's a trend that's been like 4 or 5 years now. Anytime that Ben's out for like an injury where he misses a week, or, last year you look at the week 17 game against the Cleveland Browns where they decided to rest him and then he comes out in the playoff game. Not that he was far from the only one that didn't play well in the first half, but you saw him get going in the second half. It just, for whatever reason, like off of rest, he kind of struggles a little bit. Just getting back, because he's really rhythm based. We talked about that a lot on here too. He's really rhythm based as far as a passer now. So that worries me. Maybe he comes out slow, and I expect that in the first half. Steelers defense just needs to keep it close. I'll say Chargers. I'll say Chargers 24, Steelers 20. Steelers 20 if Ben plays. but I like the Chargers to cover if Mason plays.
20. Okay, so the Chargers cover if Mason plays, which is likely what's going to happen. We'll know about Ben. From what I've heard, we'll know about
Saturday.
Ben tomorrow.
Okay.
It's not looking good from what I've heard that he plays. You said 24-20 Steelers. And see, now you got me thinking our 24-20 Chargers.
Yeah.
If Ben plays.
If Ben plays.
If Ben doesn't play, Chargers cover. Then see, now you got me thinking, because I went 17-10, or I went 16-10 Chargers. I thought it was just going to be an awful game. And then I was like, maybe the Steelers can pull this off. And now I'm thinking that maybe I should just stay put on the 16-10 Chargers. And I'm gonna. I think I'm gonna rock it out and just say this is it's Sunday Night Football. Sunday Night Football has sucked all season long. I don't expect it to get better with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the very iffy Los Angeles Chargers. All right, so 24-20. If we're as bad at this as we were last week, we might just hang up the picks forever. That might just have to happen.
Because we've been a bit of a streak too, man.
You were, and I've been bad for a while. I've also been losing people money in this same day 4-leg parlay. I'm just awful when it comes to bets. You don't want to look at my FanDuel account right now, but it's all right. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. This is Fridays with Derek the Kid. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube at All Steelers Talk and follow your favorite podcast host at Noah Strack at Steelers_DB. Enjoy your Sunday Night Football coming from Los Angeles, and we will see you next week.